The awareness in the U.S. of Chinese espionage has been on par with the awareness in the United States of Chinese political warfare, and that has been pretty low. The CCP is vacuuming up intellectual property globally. The degree of academic infiltration is pervasive in the United States, and it's been pervasive in Taiwan. They were offered honey trap, sexual enticement.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. In 1945, Russian school children presented a hand-carved Great Seal of the United States to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow. It was proudly displayed in the ambassador's study for 7 years before a shocking discovery was made. It held a covert listening device. It came to be known as the Thing by Americans. Revolutionary for its time, it held no wires or batteries, but was activated by a radio signal from a van outside. And that's how Soviet agents were able to record conversations. Now, the world of espionage continues to evolve past the days of the Cold War, with the focus now shifting to China. To decipher China's influence operations in Taiwan, we are joined by Kerry Gershaneck, a NATO Fellow professor, author, and a former U.S. Marine. His book, Political Warfare: Strategies for Combating China's Plan to Win Without Fighting, has recently been released in Mandarin in Taiwan, and he's joining us from an undisclosed location in Southeast Asia. Thank you so much for being part of the program. Russian spying operations were often the plotline in Hollywood movies or James Bond thrillers, but away from the entertainment industry, how much awareness is there, particularly in the US, of the threat of China's espionage?
The awareness in the U.S. of Chinese espionage has been on par with the awareness in the United States of Chinese political warfare, and that has been pretty low. It has only been in recent years that the country has paid much attention to it, and it was manifested by the spy balloon incident, but that was only the tip of the iceberg. The pervasive PRC espionage in the United States, it is inextricably intertwined at this point within our government, within our academia, within our entertainment industry, read that Hollywood, and within our business community and other key elements of American society and governance at the subnational level, as you saw up in New York State with the recent spy case there. It's not only they penetrated the governor's office and very effectively blocked diplomatic outreach and other efforts by Taiwan and New York State through their agents of influence and their spies in the governor's office and in key positions in the state government. The mayor of New York City right now, as of today, is under indictment for, among other things, foreign influence. Well, it's well known that the mayor has been heavily engaged with the United Front Work Department organizations in New York City, the ones that hosted the illegal police, overseas police departments in New York City. And well, it remains to be seen whether the indictment includes collusion with the People's Republic of China, but certainly foreign influence is going to be part of that indictment.
I want to break down a lot of that in our conversation. But first, I want to talk about the book you've just released here, Political Warfare: Strategies for Combating China's Plan to Win Without Fighting. Can you explain the idea of winning without fighting?
Sure. First, if we can establish why we don't want the People's Republic of China to win without fighting or with fighting, you have to establish the nature of the regime. The nature of the Chinese Communist Party is that it is basically a totalitarian, a genocidal, fascist, military and economically powerful and hyper-nationalistic nation. It's on the march, and we can't let this expansionist regime take over the democracy, annex the democracy that is Taiwan. We can't let it destroy my country, which is its number. Taiwan and the United States are number 1 and 2 on their hit parade. So we have to block them. So to understand how they really want to win, they can go to kinetic war. They're increasingly more capable every day to go on the kinetic battlefield and fight and put up a pretty good fight and maybe win. But right now, their goal is to win without fighting. What that means is without us fighting back. It doesn't mean struggle. It doesn't mean without violence. It just means at some point they divide, demoralize, and in their terminology, disintegrate us, Divya, to the point that we just don't fight back. They've been very clever, and we've been very blind, willfully blind in the case of many of our government officials and in academia and the business community in the United States and Taiwan for many years, because we were being attacked every day. And there was just this willful blindness. We didn't want to think that China was going to go bad. We hoped after the fall of the Soviet Union that you so wonderfully spoke about their espionage efforts. After the Soviet Union fell in 1991, we were hoping we could win over the People's Republic of China. And we lived in this little fairyland, or many of our people did. A lot of us didn't fall for it. But many fell for it, that we can change China. China didn't want to be changed. The 1989 Tiananmen massacre showed it wasn't going to be changed, but too many in my country and again Taiwan and in Hong Kong, where you're from, too many wanted to believe that we can change communist China. So what they've been doing is fighting war against us since 1949. It's called political warfare. What that means in America is all means at a nation's disposal short of mid-intensity or higher conflict to achieve your national objectives. Now, that can mean overt and covert operations. It can mean political alliances, economic measures, propaganda, covert operations such as supporting underground organizations in occupied countries. Okay, but the communists in China, with the help of the Soviet Union, their mentors in the 1920s, they took traditional political warfare, Divya, and they put it on steroids. And they have really, really taken it to new heights. So again, it's the CCP's preferred means of achieving its national objectives. And it means basically total war. Divya, anything is permissible. They call this unrestricted warfare. What we've got to do is get all the terminology that's associated with political warfare, like unrestricted warfares, of which there's at least 40, and then the 3 warfares and all the other warfares, because the Chinese communists think in terms of warfare. Everything's war to them. We have to learn that terminology. It takes a bit of study. You have to understand it holistically. So it's secret. It's highly deceptive, and it consists of a whole lot of activities. It consists of active measures. It's I can go into some of those active measures in a little while because they're happening in your country right now.
So political warfare on steroids. A great term, a very interesting term. We often hear, let's bring it to Taiwan, we often hear China's refrain about reunification by force if necessary. We hear about their gray zone tactics. We see their military exercises all being tracked. But what are we not seeing? What is the covert, as those examples you said you wanted to get into, that we're not seeing that China is doing when it comes to espionage here?
Well, espionage and political warfare, the term you just used, reunification, they're in your head. Anyone who uses the term reunification, they made a psychological warfare point with you. It's annexation. Taiwan was never part of communist China or China. So what they do is they frame through the entertainment industry, through their media warfare, through either their propaganda organs or the news media organizations globally that they've co-opted or somehow gotten to toe their party line. They define the narrative. They try to define the terminology. And reunification, it's one of their key points, that if everyone understands that Taiwan used to be part of China, then no one's going to get upset that China is reunifying with what has historically been theirs. Nonsense, of course. They used the same thing with Tibet when they took Tibet. And when they took Xinjiang and all the other areas, It's all their narrative that they're conveying covertly through many mediums. They're doing it through what they call the three warfares. Political warfare is three major elements: that's psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare. So they're doing it overtly through political warfare with bringing lawsuits against people that expose them in the news media. They ignore, in some cases, law like the ruling, the arbitral ruling on the South China Sea, which said the 9-dash line is bogus. It is there is no validity to it in law. But what they're doing is fighting it in universities across the Association of Southeast Asian Nations by going in and threatening, literally. So these are some of the covert activities that are going on a daily basis. Active measures are covert: assassination, terrorism, enforced disappearances, street violence. The criminal gangs behind the street violence in Taiwan and other places. That's covertly funded and organized, but it's happening on the streets of America, and it's CCP involved in it.
If we take one of the examples here in Taiwan that was, of course, hugely publicized by Taiwan. In late August, Taiwan handed down a set of sentences involving a 10-person spy ring working for China. The cases involved a conspiracy for special forces pilots to defect by flying a Chinook helicopter into a Chinese aircraft carrier. Can you tell us, I mean, this one was, very much publicized, very extreme, but can you give us an idea of how much perhaps influence China currently has, or how much espionage work they're trying to do within the military ranks itself, which is what we hear about most here in Taiwan, especially in recent times?
The military is always going to be a primary vector of attack for both the People's Liberation Army, intelligence, but also Ministry of State Security, Ministry of Public Security, and United Front Work Department operatives. Everybody's vectoring the military. So the way they do that is they go into the communities outside the military bases. They find out from the pawn shops who needs money, who's pawning items, who can we go to and offer money to spy for the People's Republic of China against the Taiwan armed forces. That's one way to do it. Ideologically, there is a element within, or there has been an element within the Taiwan armed forces that has been raised historically through KMT to be sympathetic to the CCP, that we're all China. And so it is not a stretch for you to, you young captain, young lieutenant, colonel, retiring general, to help us, because when we take over, this is a PRC spy, when we take over, we'll give you your rank in the PLA. So there's different ways that they approach recruiting within the military. The association, the Chinese Association of Friendly International Contact, KFIC, is a major organization within the PLA that is designed to co-opt the military in Taiwan. They've co-opted through KFIC. They've co-opted retired American generals and admirals. They have their spies. So I'm trying to be a little bit equal opportunity blamer here. It's not just Taiwan that's been impacted by the espionage. We had a key fellow at National Defense University who was destroying the careers of those who were considered China hawks there, who turned out ultimately to be a spy. A guy named Ron Monteperde went on to become the dean of the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, and he was basically allegedly acting as an agent of influence for the PRC. So he got convicted of lesser crimes, but what was reported in the media about what he really did was far more extensive than what he got convicted of. So that's how they do it. Now, what exacerbates the spying is, one, there hasn't been a lot of accountability in Taiwan. I mean, go back and do a study on what the sentences have been. For many of the spies that were painstakingly caught, they may have had to sacrifice the identities of some of the sources. The investigative agencies, MJ, the Ministry of Justice Investigative Bureau, and others may have had to, expose some of their sources that they used to identify these spies. Gave up a lot to bring them to court, and they get slaps on the wrist. They get a few months in jail, and that's it. And this is to senior officers, generals, colonels, who sold out their country, willing to sell out, if not their children, your children, the children of everyone on your staff, the children of all their junior officers, all their enlisted personnel and their families, into the jackboot of, again, totalitarian genocidal rule under the CCP. And for what? They got some money and they were going to get some status. They should have been punished far more seriously. Taiwan has to have, again, the moral courage and honesty to prosecute these people to a much fuller extent of the law than has been done in many cases.
Mm-hmm. And another area where you say the CCP, as you say, they've been winning in political warfare in many areas, but one other area has been intellectual property, where they've managed to gain a lot of intellectual property, mainly due to corporations and the business environments that have been created. Given that, how much of a target is Taiwan's highly coveted semiconductor industry and knowledge in their spying operations?
Oh, we can assume that it's very high up on the list of the request for information or the tasking for their spies that they send over, either as businessmen or it's under the guise of being students or through third-party other nation agents that they've recruited. You can assume that because of the global strategic significance of those microchips, that's very high on the list. But basically, they're vacuuming up, the CCP is vacuuming up intellectual property globally. And if you look at a report that was just released by the U.S. Congress, I think 2 days ago, about all the absolutely insane, there's no other word for it, there's no kind word for it, it's just willfully blind, suicidal connections that American universities have built with PLA and Ministry of State Security related education, so-called education institutions in China, and the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of intellectual property that we gave to the American universities and American academics shared with them, either by having their people come over, people affiliated with the PLA come over and integrate in our universities, and it would be on the staffs, or somehow we provided them the data. It's absolutely appalling. We need to start holding people accountable, but that's one of the many ways they get our intellectual property. Cyber attacks, of course, they're always attacking us. We have to get, increasingly better. We can never consider China a pacing challenge, because we'll always need to be a step ahead of China when it comes to taking our technology we developed, say, on hypersonics and our technology on drones. They're always going to be driving to get it so they can ultimately defeat us. One day, they're not going to be a pacing challenge. One day, and that day is very soon, they're going to be actually the hegemon. They're going to be the more powerful one, and they're going to use that against us. So we have, at some point, part of our strategy for fighting back is we have to stop the Chinese Communist Party, because at one point, they're going to surpass us, and then the game's over.
You spoke about Taiwan needing to hold people to account more, particularly the people that they found involved in espionage, with tougher punishments. But what else can be done to increase awareness of the amount of espionage or of the amount of infiltration and influence operations there could be, or there is, from China in Taiwan?
Your program is one good step. Public education. The history of Taiwan, that the White Terror under the KMT, the nationalists, the fact that Taiwan slowly, painfully, but peacefully transitioned to democracy. Well, there's a big scar from the era of the White Terror. Okay, get it. get over it as much as you can, Taiwan, because that has blocked a lot of legislation that was needed up until about, after about 2018. Then Taiwan was getting better at passing the legislation, the laws that were needed to fight back. But the point is that because of that traumatic history of authoritarian repression and really brutal repression of rights and all of the other bad things that happened that you're well aware of, people of Taiwan are wary of going too far in the area of enforcement for these kind of crimes. It's tough, too, with the divided legislative yuan. I understand that. Everything is hard. Same thing in America right now. But the point is that there's got to be better investigative tools available. There's got to be better means of holding civil servants accountable, holding academics accountable. And I'll come back to academia later because I was rather appalled by the degree of infiltration by co-opted academics when I was in Taiwan. We need to hold people accountable if they're in the service, if they are actually taking action that supports the takeover by this totalitarian, genocidal, fascist regime.
Right, we're just about running out of time here, but before we go, I'll get you to give us that a very quick overview on your concerns about academia in Taiwan. Well,
the CCP has gone infiltrated academia globally. You can't find many American college campuses that aren't receiving a large number of full-paying PRC students that isn't getting all kinds of endowments, Stanford, Harvard, all of the big name universities that are engaged in a number of highly questionable interactions with the CCP and the PRC. This is all proof that their efforts over decades to infiltrate American academia has been quite successful. For a long time, you just simply could not get a speaker on many of campuses who would criticize the CCP. Why? You wouldn't get an invitation. They were self-censoring on campus. They didn't want to offend China. And in the case of University of Hawaii or the case of California universities, you would get visited by someone from the Los Angeles consulate, or you would get a phone call if you were going to have someone come in to speak on free Tibet, or you were going to have somebody come in and talk about what's happening in Hong Kong, the repression of rights in Hong Kong post PRC takeover and crackdown. So the degree of academic infiltration is pervasive in the United States, and it's been pervasive in Taiwan. All started under President Ma, primarily when the floodgates opened for academic exchanges. I've talked with a number of academics who were engaged during that time and brought over with a number of other Taiwan academics, and every effort was made to co-opt those academics. They were offered jobs. They were offered payment for papers of dubious value. They were offered honey traps, sexual enticement. They were offered everything to get them to just begin working with the PRC, to begin working with the CCP. Then when they got back to Taiwan, then they were expected to toe the CCP line, and many of them did. So different ways that they've co-opted and infiltrated in Taiwan. The pan-red academics is what the term is I use for them. You can see them at every conference. They're the ones who will dutifully regurgitate every CCP party line. When you confront them and say, okay, criticize Xi Jinping, say one thing that you think is wrong about Xi Jinping, and it's very obvious. They turn red, they sort of clam up, and they know that the others in the room who are either aligned pro-CCP or have been co-opted in one way or another will report them if they do. So the litmus test at conferences and other seminars and events with these pan-red academics is, okay, criticize the CCP. Say one thing. You're always criticizing the U.S. You're always criticizing the democratically elected government of Taiwan. Criticize the CCP or Xi Jinping personally. That's a litmus test that shows, okay, this person's co-opted. There's many other tests as well. But you get the point that it's pervasive, and it's one of those areas where we have to say, you're infiltrating our universities, CCP, you're infiltrating K through 12. You've got your Chinese student associations, and you've got your Confucius Institutes. We're going to crack down. The point is we have to start holding the academics accountable while ensuring academic freedom. Just you can pretty much figure out who's toeing the line for the CCP. So with that, I'll just summarize by saying it takes moral courage and intellectual honesty to survive on a college campus anyway, and either in the United States or Taiwan these days, to speak up about the Chinese Communist Party, because a lot of your peers are going to censor you. You won't be invited to the name conferences. You won't be invited to submit a paper, because they, in their own way, are beholden to the CCP, or simply don't want to offend the CCP so they can get their visa, so they can get their invited to their conferences. Many other ways that the CCP has their tentacles into them, but we have to find a way to start holding the academics accountable. In America, last point, we have a law that's part of our public education law that says that our universities are supposed to report how much money they get from foreign sources. When the Trump administration finally enforced that law, because the previous administration, the Obama administration didn't, and the Biden administration has not, it turned out that our universities were getting hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, this is Stanford, this is Harvard, these are all the named colleges, a lot of Ivy League colleges. Turned out a lot of them were getting it and not reporting it. That impacts decisions by school administrators, school presidents, and faculty members. When they have that money pouring into them, they don't want to lose that gravy train.
Mm-hmm. You know, this has been such a fascinating and somewhat troubling conversation. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Kerry Gershaneck, NATO Fellow, Professor and author, joining us on our program. And for our viewers everywhere, it has been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you'd like to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.